Alright, so in the last video I did my Nikon rangefinder collection in its entirety, and that's the majority of my collection, but I do have some other cameras I was going to go over, so that's what I'm doing in this video. And of course I'm going to start off with more Nikon, not rangefinders per se, but SLRs. This is currently the only Nikon film SLR I have. It's a Nikon FM2T, which is basically, there's the original FM2, then there's the FM2N, which I think has an upgraded light meter, and the FM2T has a titanium body, so there's just kind of marginal improvements here and there. The T's are pretty distinctive though, because they have this unusual color palette where it's kind of a, they call it a champagne, but it's kind of a dull gold color. I kind of like it. I think it looks pretty good. It does wear off pretty easily, but I don't mind. I got this camera pretty cheap, and I knew it was pretty well worn. I even had to put a replacement screw in here. And I have this little strap I made, another one. This is kind of a rougher looking homemade strap, but it gives it a nice, interesting, well-worn look, and hopefully that prevents people from stealing it too, which is kind of nice. Onto the lenses. I got another one of my little custom lens caps, but the one I have on it and often keep on it is this early 35mm f2.8 lens. I don't know if this was originally an AI or a pre-AI lens. I think it might have been a pre-AI that was factory modified, but it's kind of hard to tell. But it works well. It's not the fastest lens, but you know, it's a 35. It's solid. It gets the job done, and it doesn't really disappoint. Next up, we have the 50mm f1.4. I haven't used this a lot. I bought it at a thrift store about a year ago for like $25. I just couldn't pass it up. And this one is an interesting example where it's an early one where it has the sort of scalloped or clamshell metal focusing ring. But it has definitely seen a later AI upgrade because it has the AI compatibility with the little shelf and the smaller numbers down here. But it is a much later plastic ring that has sort of the checkerboarding on it. So that's obviously one that was sent back and kind of refurbished later. I don't mind that much. I'd rather have the AI than the non-AI, even if it's a little anachronistic. But yeah, that's one I have, and I haven't used it a lot. It's in pretty good shape. There is a bit of a scuff on one of the elements, but it's very usable. I just don't use a ton of 50s all that much. Some, but not as much as some of the wider lenses. And I've been using the rangefinders a lot more, so I haven't had a lot of time for this one. And lastly, we have the lens that might be the most interesting. We got the 28 f2.8 AIS series. And this is a much more modern one. They made these for a long time, up until like 2013 or 2014. And I think this is a later production one. I don't know the exact year, but I would say it's definitely from well into the 2000s. It's in very good shape. I got it pretty cheap. I really like it. It might be my favorite lens, but it's always kind of, I always hate to make comparisons like that. You will notice that it does have an adapter, and this is obviously a Nikon F mount to a Sony E mount adapter. And that's because I actually keep it on the Sony A7 I'm shooting with right now, and use that to shoot most of my videos. And I'm doing this video on the sort of Sony Zeiss 28mm f2 lens. But I usually shoot them on this lens. I just kind of like it a little better. I find the manual focus often works better for video, because you can kind of actually get hard focus on something and it doesn't skip around, which it looks like it's been pretty good of not doing this time. But whenever you don't want it to skip is when it starts skipping. But that's pretty much the entire SLR collection I have. I did have the Nikon FE, but after the electronics went out, I gave it away to somebody, and they seemed to have some idea they could fix it, and I think they ended up throwing it away or something. But unfortunately, that one died. It was kind of a neat little camera, but you know, all good things must come to an end. So this is pretty much it right now for the Nikon SLR collection. All right, so now we skip it to medium format, and we have the very venerable Mamiya 7. Of course, I pretty much only shoot it with the 65mm lens as of late, and I've had a lot of luck with that. But I have the 43mm lens right here, and here's a bag that has the external finder and the lens hood for it, and I think there's a couple other accessories in there. I just try to keep them all together. And while the 43 is a good lens, it's a very good lens. It's probably one of the better wide-angle lenses available for a medium format camera, with just a couple of exceptions out there. I just find the 65 is a little bit more versatile. It's pretty close to a 35 on a full frame or 35mm camera. You know, and I find that to be kind of the perfect focal length, honestly. So this works very well, and I don't mind external finders, but when you have a camera this big and it has a fairly large external finder on top, every little bit of size and weight you can save on kind of does help a little bit. And even though the 65 lens is longer, I think the 43 is a little bit heavier. So I just like this setup I have right here, and I've been using this a lot recently, and I've had a lot of luck with it. I haven't always been a huge fan of medium format, but it's kind of grown on me, especially with this particular setup, and I've really enjoyed it. Nothing too special about the actual setup, but like I said, that's probably one of the more expensive and more desirable cameras I own, I guess, and I have used it quite a bit over the last year or so, and I've really been enjoying it. All right, so back again with another medium format. This is one I kind of talked about recently, the Super Fujica 6, which I always feel like it should be Fujica Super 6, but, you know, I didn't name it. And this is a Japanese automat style camera that kind of pops out. Very small when folded up, but decent size when it's unfolded. I kind of like this camera. It looks really nice. It seems to be pretty reliable. It is a little tricky to use. It's not too confusing, but you do kind of have to get in a certain rhythm to use it properly, not like skip frames or double expose. I like it, but I've kind of been leaning towards the Mamiya 7 more. And just, I know I've made a lot of camera videos, but I actually traded, I think it was the Diox 1A and that Praktica 2. I traded the two of those for this camera. I think it was a pretty good deal, but I haven't been using it a ton. I've tried to lean myself more into using the Mamiya 7 just because it is a little bit better, and I've already got quite a few images from it, and I don't want to start some whole other project or system of images with a different camera or as a slightly different format. So now we have the Brumberger. Of course, I did a video on this. I think it was actually featured in about 2 or 3 videos, and it's a camera I kind of like. It's very simple and easy to use. I kind of like the lens. It's not the best in the world, but it focuses close and lets you get some nice effects, and I just kind of like its retro vintage look, and the fact that it's very straightforward and simple and easy to use. You can't really go wrong with it, in my opinion, until this happens and the shutter doesn't fire. Now you can kind of trip it right there and force it, but it seems like it's got a lot of oil on the shutter blades, and I'm gonna have to clean it up. I just haven't had the time to do it. I think I need some special screwdriver to get in there I don't quite have, so I don't know when I'll fix it, but I will try and fix it at some point in the future. But for now, it's going to be shelved, and it's just going to sit there and collect some dust until I can eventually get it fixed. And here we have the Alpa. So this was actually kind of a dream camera of mine, and I was pretty lucky to get my hands on one. Admittedly, it's not really the greatest camera in the world, and it's not really that unique compared to a lot of other SLRs out there. But I was glad to get my hands on one. I think this one is in very good cosmetic condition. It did need to have the interior kind of CLA'd and tidied up a little bit. But I got the original lens cap. I've got the Schneider lens, which I kind of wanted one of those Switar lenses or whatever they normally come with, but I found out this one is apparently a rather rare lens, and I've used it some, and it looks pretty good, especially with color film. I think it gets a nice color rendering. It's actually pretty similar to a lot of the Nikons I've owned, not exactly, but definitely kind of in the same neighborhood. And again, the camera is... it's something I have not really used a whole lot over the past year or two. I've really only had it for maybe like 2.5 years. But I can't say I really regret that too much. This is kind of my one guilty pleasure collector's camera, where it's predominantly there to be sort of a collector's piece, and you have the fact it's a Swiss-made camera is kind of strange. It's got that weird 45-degree slant to the viewfinder. It's got this strange, the shutter button kind of on the front. Interesting features that are maybe a bit antiquated, but I think at the time were maybe not revolutionary, but probably cutting edge. I still don't fully understand why it has this little window right here, this kind of viewfinder. It does not have a rangefinder for focusing. It's just there as kind of a reference window for 50mm roughly. I know some do have a knob on top, and you can kind of adjust it, and it'll give you like I think a 35, a 50, and then a 90 or 135 point of view, which is kind of intriguing. And I've also seen some that have a different prism hub where you kind of look straight down into the mirror, and I assume there's not even a prism in there, but I don't really know. And of course, there's a lot of variations on color and the little, the sort of a film advance lever type things. I just happened to find this one, and I'd always wanted one, so I figured why not. So this is kind of my guilty pleasure collector's piece camera that just kind of sits there on the shelf, but I only have one, so I think that's pretty reasonable. And last up, I have the Voigtlander. I kind of talked about this one. It still has issues. I never got it fixed. That's why it's in the case. I didn't even bother to take it out of the case. This belonged to my grandfather. And he kind of passed it on to me, sort of. I took it from him, I guess. I don't know if he really willingly passed it on. And it's an interesting thing. It's kind of a family heirloom to a certain extent, but it's not a particularly high-end or rare camera, and it doesn't really work right now. The shutter will fire, but I think it only fires on like a couple of speeds, and it hangs up a lot. It needs to be fixed, but unfortunately I tried to open it myself and couldn't really make any headway on repairs. And sending it off for repair costs about as much as buying a whole new camera. And I could actually get a whole new camera in this family with a better lens on it for that price. So I just didn't really feel like it was worth it. But I couldn't bring myself to part with this one. I definitely wasn't going to throw it away. And I didn't really want to sell it off. It's been sitting around for a while. So at some point I might trade it to somebody or sell it, especially if they think they can fix it. But, I haven't really been in a big hurry to, since it is one of the only cameras I have any real connection to. And speaking of that, I actually have one more. This is an odd one you wouldn't expect me to have. It is a Polaroid. This is is it a Kodak brand? No, it's a Polaroid branded, yeah. It's a Polaroid land camera, Sun 660. This is kind of from the late 80s, I want to say, maybe early 90s. It's one of those Polaroids. It's all automatic and has a flash and everything in it. I usually don't like Polaroid that much, but this is actually kind of my family camera from when we were growing up. This would be pulled out at like birthday parties and, like Christmas or Halloween to take a couple of photos. It didn't get used much because even back then the Polaroid film was very expensive. But I did play with this and took a few photos when I was a kid. We had another 35mm camera. I think we had a couple. But I think they were all pretty cheap and kind of came and went over the years. And of course, I remember having some of the early digital cameras and stuff, which all are long since gone. But this is another one I just kind of hold on to for sentimental value. So I guess I have these two and maybe the Alpa as sort of just collector's pieces. But I think all of them do have at least a little hint of sentimental value. And, none of them are exceptionally valuable. So I know it's probably not worth it to sell them because, do I really want to get $30 or something so I can put it towards another camera and give up these cameras I do have some connection to. I'm not the most sentimental person in the world, but I do like holding on to a few things like that. So that's kind of why I've held on to these two for so long. And that is actually it for my camera collection. That is every film camera I own and every manual lens I own. Obviously, I own some digitals. I have a Nikon Z6 Mark II and the Sony A7 I'm shooting this on right now, which of course I can't really show you. And a couple lenses for each one, but I don't find those quite as exciting. I kind of find the film stuff a little bit more exciting. But that's an overview of my entire collection now. Hopefully you guys enjoy it and, I don't know, get something out of it maybe.